YouTube with the Minnesota Timberwolves emerging as a Western Conference legitimate contender in the 2024 NBA season, alongside the emergence of Anthony Edwards as one of the league's top 15 or 10 players, and with the Minnesota Timberwolves having the best defense in the league last season, as well as having their best season since the Kevin Garnett era. I think it's safe to say the Minnesota Timberwolves are officially a team in the Western Conference to be taken extremely seriously in 2025, and in my opinion, I'm going to explain in this video why I think it is only up from here, and that includes the 2025 NBA season. I really do believe the Minnesota Timberwolves will be dominant in 2025 and actually be a little bit better than they were in 2024. And while you don't make any splash trades or, big time offseason free agency signings, you do, however, acquire two excellent rookie players that I think will make a massive impact next season. Folks, this is a Minnesota Timberwolves deep dive, and in this video, we're going to be going through every single move they've made this offseason. That includes draft, trades, free agency, re-signings, additions, and departures. And then after that, we're going to be doing a massive roster inventory, and that will entail me going through player by player on this roster, everyone you can expect to see in 2025 on the court for the Minnesota Timberwolves. And throughout the video, I'm going to be sprinkling in my takes about this team, why I think they'll be dominant in 2025. This is going to be a good one, man. I've been looking forward to this one. Minnesota fans, let me know down in the comments section how we're feeling about this team for the upcoming 2025 NBA season. Let's get right into the deep dive, folks. So as I mentioned, we're going to start with the offseason, and we're going to start with the re-signings category for the Minnesota Timberwolves. And there is one re-signing. You actually extend Luka Garza on a 2-year deal. Luka Garza being a depth piece at the 5 position. And from what I understand, this is a player that Coach Finch and his staff and the Timberwolves organization really like. There is no shortage of big men on the Minnesota roster, that is for sure. Luka Garza, the center, he is 25 years old, 6'10", 243 pounds. Last season played 25 games for the Minnesota Timberwolves. Actually didn't have much of a role on this team, but if this is a player you really think you can develop for the Timberwolves, I don't see why it's not a great signing. I actually think it's a pretty good depth piece for that center position. And moving on to the additions, we actually have 2 additions to this roster in free agency, one of them being guard PJ Dozier. And PJ Dozier is a player that has bounced around the league quite a bit. He is a versatile guard who has a lot of defensive upside, and that fits right in with Minnesota and how they like to play. It'll be interesting to see what kind of role Dozier gets, if any, on this team, because you do have a lot of guard depth now. We'll talk about the draft in a little bit, but I think just adding another depth piece to the roster, with some defensive upside from the guard position is a good thing. You also add this offseason 36-year-old longtime NBA veteran Joe Ingles. This is a 1-year contract for Joe Ingles. Previously with the Orlando Magic, spent a long time in his career in Utah, so I'm sure you Wolves fans will know all about him, playing against him quite a bit in the Western Conference. But Joe Ingles is 36, and I do still believe he has some defensive limitations to him, but it is probably at the end of the day a solid Kyle Anderson replacement, right? I know they're different kind of players. Joe Ingles is a sharpshooter. That's primarily his biggest trait, in my opinion, the best one, but they're both big guards that are both smart, intelligent players offensively. I think replacing that type of player with a Joe Ingles is amazing, because as we know, Kyle Anderson's biggest weakness probably his 3-point shooting. So Joe Ingles last season for the Orlando Magic, playing 68 games and averaging about 44% from 3 on about 2.4 attempts per game. That is incredible shooting numbers for Joe Ingles. Very solid playmaker as well. As a big guard, he is 6'9", 220. I think he makes a good fit on this team in limited minutes as primarily a catch and shoot monster on the wing, who is also a vocal leader. So I think it makes a lot of sense to add Joe Ingles to that 1-year deal. Those are the additions and re-signings. Now let's get into the departures, folks. For the departures, you have probably the biggest one, Kyle Anderson. And Slow-Mo was actually a very solid rotation player for the Minnesota Timberwolves. Kyle Anderson's a versatile skill set player. He can handle the ball, he can distribute very well for his position. He's a very solid help defender. He is a good basketball IQ player on both ends of the floor. He provides solid stability in any lineup he's in, and he signs a multi-year deal with the Golden State Warriors. I will say there is plenty of depth to replace what Kyle Anderson brought to the table for you guys as that playmaker, rebounder, just quality utility piece for you guys. I think the Timberwolves will be just fine, even though Kyle Anderson is a versatile player with a good skill set for his position. It is certainly a big loss losing that big of a rotation player, but as I mentioned, there are players to fill in that role, and we'll talk about them a little later in the roster deep dive. For the second departure, you have Jordan McLaughlin, who ends up signing a deal with the Sacramento Kings, and McLaughlin, a 5-year member of the Minnesota Timberwolves. Actually, all 5 years of his career were with the Timberwolves, and this is a player with a high assist to turnover ratio. He is an excellent decision maker with the ball in his hands. as a, kind of third string backup point guard, whatever you want to call him. 56 games for the Wolves last season. But you do bring in some valuable point guard pieces who we'll talk about later. You lose another point guard in Monte Morris, who was a midseason addition for the Wolves. Played a little bit in the playoffs, couldn't really find a consistent rhythm or role with this team in my opinion, but Monte Morris still a good player. He ends up signing with the Phoenix Suns. Again, you brought in some excellent point guard play, which we'll get into, so it's hard for me not to talk about this roster right now. I'm really struggling here, folks. Wendell Moore Jr. Was a project piece for you guys. A young player, with some expectations out of the draft. Unfortunately, he never ended up finding a solid role for the Timberwolves. Pretty unfortunate, but you do end up trading him to the Detroit Pistons, and you basically get a future second round pick and cash considerations, as well as Cam Spencer, who you sent to the Grizzlies on draft day. So nothing too crazy over the top in this offseason as far as the re-signings, additions, and departures. But to be fair, you won't expect much of those crazy moves out of a team who was just in the West Finals last season with a young roster who's up and coming. So it would absolutely make sense for this team not to have too many over the top kind of moves. I give it a solid C+, B- offseason. I don't think anything too crazy happened. I don't think you get a ton better in that sense, but I don't think you get really worse at all. So I would say Kyle Anderson, kind of a big loss, but again, you will have plenty of players to compete for that role and probably fill it in just as nicely. So people might say this is a boring offseason. I think it, kind of is an offseason where you're basically just trying to, maintain the status quo, which I think is a fair play from the Timberwolves. You're locked in with a lot of cap situations, and the NBA draft is actually really where you made your noise. So let's get right into the NBA draft for the Minnesota Timberwolves. As I mentioned, it's already an A+ grade for me. And in the 2024 NBA draft, you actually ended up trading with the San Antonio Spurs for the 8th overall pick in this draft and selecting Kentucky guard Rob Dillingham with the 8th overall pick. This is one of my favorite players in the entire draft. I always say this, folks, when in doubt, draft a Kentucky guard, okay? It can never hurt. There's just so many of them every single year, and they all seem to pan out exceptionally well. I know for me, as a Sixers fan, Tyrese Maxey being one of them. So Rob Dillingham, 8th overall pick, and he is a smaller guard with elite perimeter shot making upside, in my opinion. This is a guy I have talked about so much with the Minnesota Timberwolves on this channel, how, in my opinion, last season with the Wolves, their biggest issue in the playoffs was a secondary shot creator and ball handler. And a lot of times you were asking Kyle Anderson to be your secondary ball handler. There were times throughout the playoffs where, Mike Conley was exceptionally good at being a stabilizer, but there were times where you just need a little bit of pop. A guy who could get their own shot. Cat is a great second option. Ant is obviously your first option. He did exceptionally well in the playoffs. But at the end of the day, someone else has got to chip in that department. It can't all be Ant, and you can't have just guys that can, have to be set up. There needed to be an extra bit of firepower from the self-creation department, and that is, I believe, what Rob Dillingham is going to bring to this team day one. He's only 19 years old. I know the Summer League stats were a little bit inefficient. He struggled to shoot efficiently in the Summer League, but if you watch the Summer League games, actually Rob Dillingham was a much better playmaker than I thought he was going into the Summer League. I already liked him a ton because of his exceptional burst with the ball in his hands, right? This is again, an elite perimeter shot maker, with that kind of upside as a 6'1" point guard. There are questions about his finishing ability, but this is probably one of the best ball handlers in the draft, if not the best. He is able to get to almost any spot on the floor, and with that excellent playmaking ability, and at the end of the day, this is actually a really smart IQ offensive player. So not only can he get to the spots frequently where he wants to set himself up for a shot or his teammates by blowing past defenders and using his creativity, ball handling to get to his spots, but then he can make exceptional passes in that regard once he gets to those spots. So this is a lightning bolt player who can get down the court in a hurry, blow past defenders that are bigger than him. It's going to be a nightmare to track Rob Dillingham all over the court. Think of Tyrese Maxey in that regard. Exceptionally quick ball handler who can blow by you in a hurry. But the difference between Rob Dillingham and Maxey, in my opinion, is Rob Dillingham's playmaking ability. He is so good at playmaking for his age. He just makes passes that are very instinctual, that, it is kind of a natural ability for him, in my opinion. For a 19-year-old guard to possess these types of passes and be able to make them consistently like you see in the Summer League, he's just so creative, in so many different ways. And I think he's also a good athlete and good enough to disrupt passing lanes defensively, be a pest to ball handlers on the defensive end if he commits to it. I know he'll have to in Minnesota with that defensive identity, but I'm telling you, man, Rob Dillingham is probably going to be the sixth man of this team. He's probably going to be the guy that comes in for Mike Conley. He could play next to Ant. He could also play, with the second unit, but just adding that scoring pop from a guy who can do it himself, not have to, rely on somebody to set them up. Again, I think Cat's a great number 2 option. He's one of the more talented big men we've seen in the league ever, but he cannot bring the ball up and create create his own shot on 3 different levels. That's not the type of player he is. So that is what the Timberwolves needed last season. They needed another guy that could do that. You actually probably get one of the best ones in the draft. I just can't say enough good things about Dillingham and how he fits in with this team. It is the biggest need on this team. You addressed it in the biggest way you could. There is going to be quite a lot asked of Rob Dillingham, you know, as a 19-year-old point guard going into this season. And I think it is a 6-man bench role to be one of the top scorers on this team and hunt shots and get his own buckets creatively from the perimeter and also set up many teammates in the process. If anyone can do it, it's him, man. You got to trust the Kentucky point guards. They always seem to pan out. Another excellent value pick at 27th overall. You actually select Terrance Shannon Jr. Terrance Shannon Jr. Actually looked much more NBA ready than I thought he would be coming out of the draft. If you watch his summer league tape, this guy is an athlete, and he was actually a lot bigger than I thought he would be. You know, just looking at his profile, you know, it says he's 6'6", and I believe that, but I also think, again, if you just watch him play, he plays a lot bigger than that. You know, he is able to knock down perimeter shots. You know, how consistently, we'll just have to see. He is a lefty, wing or forward, in my opinion. Probably a wing, but you know, his size, like, he has a big NBA body already. Again, I saw him make a lot of plays in the summer league where, you know, he was getting into passing lanes. He was blocking shots from behind. He was using that vertical leaping ability to contest interior, you know, shooters and stuff like that. So I do think that his defense will be that of a playmaker and a gambler. And I think it's going to pay off well with that size and athleticism that he has. He's probably going to be able to guard multiple positions just looking at his size profile, right? But again, he is a gambler, you know, no question about it. He's going to be looking for, you know, offensive opportunities by getting in those passing lanes, stealing the ball, and using that tremendous athleticism, finishing ability to get in the fast break and go and run in transition and make something happen with his, you know, excellent finishing and leaping ability, dunks and, you know, big time and ones, right? But I do think his slashing ability and his ability to get to the rim, you know, it's going to translate immediately. I watched him in the summer league. I'm telling you, his finishing and slashing ability will translate day one. I think this is another guy you bring off the bench to add some offensive pop to this team. I think the Minnesota Timberwolves issues in the playoffs last year ended up coming down to their stagnant offense at times in the half court, right? And so I think when you have guys like Rob Dillingham and Terrance Shannon Jr. come in, this solves one of the biggest needs, which is the stagnation. These are 2 young and spry athletes that can make things happen in transition. So for one, you know, you could use that defensive playmaking ability to create turnovers. Offense leads to defense. You get more transition, running fast break opportunities. And now you got, you know, 2 exceptional athletes to be able to do that alongside a guy like Anthony Edwards, alongside an athletic big like Rudy Gobert, as well as a secondary ball handler, you know, and a secondary perimeter scorer. That right there is Rob Dillingham. That right there could be Terrance Shannon Jr. But I'm telling you, this is a talented offensive player who has a NBA ready frame, and he's going to be able to finish against grown men day one in this league. I just can't say enough good things about this draft. You added 2 athletes that can provide a ton of offensive pop to this team off the bench. I personally believe Conley will start and Dillingham will be the 6th man. You guys let me know down in the comment section, Wolves fans or not, who do you think starts at that point guard spot? Either way, you have a solid point guard offensively, right? But I think if there's a time where the offense gets stagnant, you put Rob Dillingham in there. You say, go make it happen. Go be the microwave that, you know, the firecracker scorer that we, you know, drafted you to be. Terrance Shannon Jr., make plays in transition, get those steals, blocks, hustle. You know, he is a great competitor as well. He's an absolute dog. He is locked in when I'm watching Terrance Shannon Jr. You know, go get transition plays, go finish, you know, downhill in transition, use that big body of yours to slash and, you know, exploit poor perimeter defenders, right? These are 2 guys you can work with offensively that will just, you know, quite frankly, you can't coach a lot of the things they have. So again, A+ draft. That is probably the most time I've spent on a draft throughout this deep dive series for any team. And that is because I love the fit and just these 2 players so much in general. And again, their fit with Minnesota is absolutely, you know, flawless. So got to give props to the front office for being aggressive, going out, take a massive swing on a guy like, you know, Rob Dillingham at 8, address one of these biggest needs, which is, you know, some offensive firepower as far as a perimeter creator goes. And you bring in Terrance Shannon Jr. Maybe could be one of the steals of this draft. This guy's gonna be a bucket from day one. Hopefully his shooting percentages can go up a little bit from the perimeter. That's going to be big for him to stay on the floor. And hopefully, you know, maybe he can be a little bit less, you know, gambly on defense at times, but I think it will suit him good at times as well. So again, A+ draft. Now we're going to move into the 2024-2025 Minnesota Timberwolves roster deep dive. And I love this part of the deep dive. I'm so excited to talk about all these guys. Let's get right into it, folks. All right, folks, let's get right into the roster deep dive. And, I'd be an absolute fool to not start with the Ant-Man himself, AE, one of my favorite young players in the league. We've heard the MJ comparisons. We've heard the Kobe Bryant comparisons. Personally, I think it's a little unfavorable to Ant to compare him to those guys. And no matter who you compare him to, Anthony Edwards is one of the most exciting players in the league to watch. He is a high flyer. And, honestly, I was super impressed to see him carry this team to the heights he did at such a young age last season to the Western Conference Finals, the first one since KG for this franchise. Ant already possesses the ability within him to become the greatest Timberwolves of all time. And if I was a betting man, I'd actually bet money on it, okay? For one, his competitive spirit. A lot of times you see these young stars come into the league and maybe they don't, quite give that type of energy to the leadership that, it takes to be that great, okay? Anthony Edwards wants the ball in his hands. He wants to shoot those late game situations. He wants to hit the big shots. He wants to take you off the dribble and make something happen when the team needs it most. He wants to be the number one guy. He has that, fiery competitiveness in him. He has that dog in him, right? And again, a lot of times you see these number one overall picks come into the league. I'm not gonna, mention people, but you guys know the type of player I'm talking about. Supremely talented. One way or another, they have elite skills, hence the number one overall pick. And quite frankly, they just don't have the mentality it takes to lead a team to those kind of heights. Anthony Edwards absolutely does, and that's why I think he'll even improve next season as a leader. Again, people are forgetting this guy is only 23 years old, okay? So to accomplish all that he has at his age of 23 is something special. I can't name a ton of players off the top of my head that lead their, team to a conference final in their 5th year. Again, another guy that is playing most of these games every season, knock on wood that continues. Last year, 79 games. The year before, 79 games. Never played less than 72 in his career. That is special, 100%. And, he has improved his scoring numbers every single year he's been in the league. He has improved his assist numbers every single year he's been in the league. This will continue next season, no question about it. Last year, he took a massive defensive leap. Not enough people talk about his perimeter defense. Man, and when he is on the perimeter on an island, on, a capable shot creator, he is as tough as it gets, okay? His lateral quickness is absolutely insane. He's able to stay in front of ball handlers with the best of them. This also could be an all defensive caliber player in the future. I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility. With the type of defense he displayed from the perimeter last season, a lot of times guarding the team's best perimeter scorer that they're playing against, okay? So I think it's pretty safe to say you guys are in excellent hands if you're a Minnesota Timberwolves fan, with your number one option being the Ant-Man. I just absolutely love this kid and, hope nothing but the best for him moving forward. There's been a lot of criticism for Karl-Anthony Towns throughout his career, but at the end of the day, I can imagine Minnesota Timberwolves fans feeling like Cat is being a little bit disrespected a lot of times because, when you really boil it down, he is, again, as I mentioned, one of the most talented offensive big men we've seen in this league, okay? The shooting ability is elite all time for a big man, no question about it. He can shoot the three from deep. He can shoot it off the catch. He can shoot him off the move. Sometimes he takes it off the dribble. He can do it around screens, movement wise, like I said, and knock him down around 40% on high volume. And he also gets them off extremely quickly. That is an underrated thing about shooters is their release time, okay? We see Steph Curry have that almost instant release time. You see a similar thing from Cat. He has a high release that is able to get it off against almost any defender. That is why you have to really stay out on the perimeter with him because for one, he gets them off quick, and two, he gets them off high. So, you really got to stay attached to Karl-Anthony Towns, and that's why it opens up a lot of things for your offense. When we see him get hot, he had a 60+ point game last season, okay? Like his rebounding is really good. He's, I think, a little bit better defensively than a lot of people think he is. And I think we saw a lot more consistency from him, down the stretch of the season and in the playoffs last season, okay? So this is absolutely a guy that's capable of being a number 2 option on a championship level team, and I think you saw that last season. And despite the, I guess criticisms people have and my critique of this team last season needing a secondary ball handler, now that I think about it, it's not really a critique of the team, but, basically that is their biggest need, going into this offseason, and they addressed it well, as I mentioned, but that does not take away from Cat as the number 2 option. He is clearly the second best player on this team for me personally, and I think, you see him in prime form. Again, he's only 28, kind of hard to imagine since he came to the league so young, but this is a player that just continues to develop his consistency, and I think as that number 2 option, he's really accepted that role well, and obviously one of the more dynamic number 2s in the league, no question. Speaking of criticism, maybe a player in the league that's probably up there, maybe top 5 in criticism throughout his, time over the last few years, and that is Rudy Gobert. People criticize the trade, people criticize, them getting him for all of those draft picks and assets, trading away to get him from Utah. His first year with them didn't really fit well with Cat. People question all the fit and stuff like that. Listen, not only did this guy win DPOY last season for his 4th time in his career, I think that is a number people don't quite respect enough. It's not exactly exactly a coincidence that the Timberwolves were the #1 defense in the league last year. Everywhere this guy goes, he propels his team to a top 5 defense. Doesn't matter what kind of defenders are around him. His defensive floor raising is immeasurable, okay? It is probably some of the best I've ever seen. You think of guys like prime Dwight Howard or prime Ben Wallace, right? These monster defenders that just increase the floor of this defense. And not even talking about floor, because this was the #1 defense in the league last year, and they only are going to get better the more they play together, okay? So again, we've mentioned Anthony Edwards' ability on the perimeter to stay in front of ball handlers. We've mentioned how Cat is a little bit slept on as a defender. He's a pretty good athlete. And then Rudy Gobert, you know, the DPOY last season, propelling this defense to a #1 seed, to the #1 defense. And obviously, this is the new identity of the Timberwolves, is a smothering defense, okay? There are plenty of other guys to give credit to, but it has to be Rudy first. We don't even talk about the rebounding. You know, the defensive rebounding is insane, right? He's just going to go out there and give you a double-double. I understand the offensive struggles at times. I understand, you know, it is a real criticism you can give of not, you know, always being able to knock down free throws consistently or take advantage of mismatches. But all things considered, man, this is one of the top 10 centers, top, you know, tier centers in the NBA, no question about it. I think we're going a little too crazy on Rudy. I don't know. Timberwolves fans, do you agree with me or do you disagree with me? Let me know down in the comments. I know it's an unpopular take to defend Rudy Gobert, but I'm going to have to do it in this video. That's truly what I believe. I think it's a little out of control on the Rudy hate. So that's just my take on it. But then again, I always, you know, try to see the positive in things, you know, on this channel. So maybe that, you know, maybe I'm biased or whatever, but I don't know. We can't mention the core of this team without talking about Jaden McDaniels and his improvement last season in the playoffs. Okay. You know, talk about a guy that was just looked at as a solid 3-and-D guy with a little bit of offensive upside. You know, last season in the playoffs, obviously showing that he can be much more than that offensively. You know, we know that this is one of the best perimeter defenders in the entire league. Last season, making second team All-NBA defense, deservedly so. And you might look at his regular season numbers, say, wow, how did he even get better? You know, it's not so much the regular season as it is the postseason. Okay. For one, he shot exceptionally well on all 3 levels. You know, let's talk about the 3-point shooting in the playoffs last season. 43% on 3.5 attempts per game. That is exceptional for an off-ball player. You know, 12 points per game. We really saw him find a rhythm late in the playoffs. And if he can continue any level of that throughout the season next year, you could be looking at your 4th best player. You could also be looking at a much improved offensive scorer. Okay. If he's able to take that, you know, 10 points a game on the same efficiency up to, you know, 15 points a game or so, and add a little bit more creation like we saw towards the end of those playoffs, we are obviously looking at a guy who could be a breakout candidate next season. Again, there's not much to break out defensively because he's already one of the best defenders in the league, obviously being elite, getting second team all defense. We've known about this for him, you know, for a while now, but one of the better, more versatile, lengthy wing defenders, you know, in the entire NBA. But if he can up his offense just a little bit more, you have him on a great contract, we could be looking at a star complementary role player for the Minnesota Timberwolves. Another guy who has found a home in Minnesota is Nickeil Alexander-Walker. You know, this, talk about a lengthy defender from the perimeter. This guy is an absolute stud defensively. Man, he is just relentless on that defensive side of the ball, isn't he? You know, also is a great perimeter shooter, you know, knockdown shooter on the perimeter, 39% from the 3 last season on 4 attempts per game. He actually broke out to me as one of the best role players, you know, in the Western Conference. Like, no joke. He can handle the ball. He can play make a little bit, okay? And I think, you know, with guys like Rob Dillingham coming in, with guys like Terrance Shannon Jr. coming in, he will be asked to do less offensively. And I think he was asked to do a little bit too much at times last season offensively, which made it a little bit, you know, more difficult for this team in the half-court setting. I don't think he's necessarily a shot creator that you want to look to, you know, in these playoff situations or these high-pressure situations. I think he's more of an off-ball, you know, 3-point, knock him down from the corner type of guy who can shoot it at a high volume, high percentage, and also provide elite tier perimeter defense on the other end. This guy is a monster, you know, navigating screens, right? We talk about that Denver series. I mean, he was just absolutely all over the floor in that series, man. He's an athlete as well. Like, I love Nickeil Alexander-Walker. He is, you know, probably going to have a very similar role to last year, which is a, you know, high minute role player, come in about 25 minutes per game, give you excellent elite perimeter defense and a consistent, reliable, high percentage 3-point shooter. But again, the defense is incredible. And another fun fact that I think is pretty cool, played all 82 games last season. This is by far his breakout year in this, you know, in the league. Early in his career with the Pelicans, you know, he was much more of an offensive minded player. I think he found his niche in the NBA, and I think it's in Minnesota long term. Mike Conley. How great has Mike Conley been for the Wolves? Mike Conley is an awesome player, you know, just a unsung hero for this league as a long-time great point guard. How much stabilization, Wolves fans, has he given your lineup night in and night out? You know, the 3-point shooting was actually a career best. You know, he shot 44% from 3 on 5 attempts per game. And, you know, if his his field goal percentage was a little bit higher, he'd have a 50-40-90 because he also shot 91% from the line. But the playmaking and reliability as a playmaker cannot be understated. Again, offensively, I think he just provided so much stability to this team. Even at his age of 36, I think Mike Conley has to be your starting point guard next season. The lead playmaker on this team who you can expect to, put the basketball in his hands, run an offense consistently, and not make many mistakes with the basketball in his hands, if any at all. He is the type of guy that you could just trust out there with the ball in his hands and still can provide a little bit of offensive pop as well at times. When he's shooting lights out, it is a scary thing because you have to give up something. And when you have guys like AE, Jaden McDaniels, Mike Conley, Rudy Gobert, and Cat on the floor, I mean, Mike Conley's probably the least of your concern other than the playmaking. But again, when he's on fire from the outside, man, this is a tough team to stop. Okay, so still a smart defender as well, able to put himself in good positions. Not the same defender he once was, I don't believe, but again, he'll get you about a steal a game, and make good decisions with the ball. So love Mike Conley as the point guard of this team, and I think again he starts next season. I know Rob Dillingham is probably going to have a big role, but I just think if you're Rob Dillingham at 19 years old, you got to expect that Mike Conley will get the bulk of those minutes, at least stagger them, because while you want to develop Rob Dillingham into that future point guard of this team, you just can't necessarily always count on a 19-year-old to run an NBA offense when you're trying to compete for a title like the Wolves are. So that's kind of my take on it. Rob Dillingham, again, we have to talk about it a little bit because this is the roster deep dive, folks. We're going to be very in depth with this, and I kind of see him as a six-man off the bench. I'm not sure Rob Dillingham is your starting workhorse point guard quite yet in his career. I think there will be some growing pains, and I think primarily what you can expect to see from him next season is elite perimeter shot creation. Again, he flies off of those screens on the ball and shoots those leaning three-point shots. Like, it is insane how he's able to knock those down. It's very similar to Damian Lillard when I watch those off the screen threes, those pick and roll pull-ups from three. Like, he almost leans towards the basket, which is very strange. And you'd probably think as a coach, fundamentally, hey, don't do that. But when he makes them like that, you probably can't say much, because if they're going in, you can't really complain, right? So again, I don't think Rob Dillingham ever is going to be a 50% on the field type of guy. Could be wrong, but I don't think at least next season that's what you're going to expect. I think he, shoots somewhere around 40% from the field, hopefully on a high volume around 36 to 40 from three. We'd like to see those shots go in early in the season and, continue to build on that momentum. But again, I think efficiency could be a little bit less than desired as a rookie, just because, again, rookie point guards, man, we saw it a lot last season with some of the point guards. So it is a thing to not worry about, but Rob Dillingham just so talented that I don't think it's going to be the worst thing in the world. The playmaking is much better than I expected. I think he comes in from Mike Conley, you get similar value. They're very different types of playmakers. I think Rob Dillingham's going to make a ton of flashy assists, but I do think this is a guy you can build around as a future point guard on this team, and I think you start to see that next season. Hopefully the production is, as I mentioned, I'd expect Rob Dillingham to average about 10 plus points a game off the bench, as a six-man scorer. I'd expect his role to be a firecracker microwave scorer off the bench. I think you could see maybe about 10 12 points a game. Hopefully, if you could, on the higher end of things, maybe 15 or so on high volume three-point shooting, all types of threes, difficult ones too, off the dribble, hopefully anywhere from 35 to 40%. I think he gets to the line quite a bit. Hopefully he can knock him down good there. I think he averages somewhere between 3 and 5 assists per game. So again, the efficiency is the big thing to watch, but I do think his skill set is so unique and so talented that I think it will be just a matter of time before he takes this team over as the six-man microwave scorer, and eventually as Mike Conley starts to phase out, the point guard of this team's future. Knock on wood for everybody to stay healthy. I think that's his role next season. And then Terrance Shannon Jr., no question, is going to have a role on this team next season. He is a wing with a lot of size, a bulky wing. You look at him, you say, is that your power forward? No, he's probably going to be your two guard off the bench. And the athleticism with him and Rob Dillingham in that backcourt, I mean, it's just going to be wild. I think his size could make up for a lot of Rob Dillingham defensive mismatches, right? So them playing together, I think actually makes a lot of sense, these two rookies. And if I'm being honest, I think Terrance Shannon Jr., another guy that you can expect to come in off the bench and provide a lot of offense as a slasher. Okay, and you could see Coach Finch, throughout different types of matchups, play him a little bit more or less than like an Alexander Walker or a McDaniels, depending on what type of thing you need. And we know about ant slashing ability. So I think this guy could be a good replacement for Anthony Edwards at times from that 2-guard position. You know, Joe Ingles, again, I think is a great high IQ basketball player. Offensively, I think he has elite sharpshooting, catch and shoot ability to him. And I think you could see, again, in different types of looks, different types of matchups, you could see Joe Ingles come in, and instead of Terrance Shannon Jr. coming in and, you know, looking for that offense, you could see, if you want to space the floor a little bit more, a Joe Ingles substitution for a guy like Anthony Edwards or Jaden McDaniels. We'll just have to see how it happens. But I think having, you know, more shooting is always a good thing. That is another thing I think the Timberwolves could have used last season a lot. And oh my goodness, I forgot about Naz Reid. Okay, he was like the 4th guy I wanted to mention. Wow. Okay, Naz Reid, one of my favorite players in the league, 6th man of the year last year. Is this guy fun to watch or what? You know, talk about the best big man trio in the league. It is undoubtedly the Timberwolves. Okay, Naz Reid could be a starting center on probably 20 teams in this league. Okay, you know, I'm maybe 20 is a little high. At least half the league could use Naz Reid as a upgrade at the starting center position. No question about it. Defensively, he's versatile. Defensively, he is a, you know, good guy in space and mobility as a big man, right? You know, the rebounding as an undersized center, not great, but it is good enough. Offensively, I think he is exceptional. Okay, he can create a little bit in the mid-range area. He is an excellent 3-point shooter. Last season, 5 attempts per game on 41% from the field. He gets to the line well for the position. He shoots efficiently from the field. But I think the two-way capabilities of him, like being so versatile on both ends, it cannot be understated. And knock on wood, this doesn't happen. But if somebody does go down, you know, between Cat and Gobert with an injury throughout the season, you know, having this guy is an absolute luxury to be able to step in for either of them and provide similar value for a stretch of the season. Still only 24 years old, 6th man of the year last year. This guy is an absolute beast on both ends of the floor. I love Naz Reid so much, one of my favorite players. Another exciting player that I like a lot is Leonard Miller. You know, he is a lefty creator that I think has a lot of offensive upside to him. He's a long player, has a slight frame, but I think he's just so fun to watch. I watched him in the summer league. It's so exciting to watch. He's only 20 years old, and this was a 2nd round pick last year. You know, didn't end up finding a role with Minnesota, but I think as a guy, you know, you hope to develop offensively. He's got a lot of upside to him. I like him a lot as a, you know, future project, and kind of another guy that, you know, if he develops to his best in this league, it could be a, you know, firecracker microwave scorer off the bench. Love him as a forward offensively with that creation ability, and the lefty, you know, bag is so fun to watch for him. It's awesome. And then Luka Garza, we've talked about briefly, you know, as the, I guess, 3rd string 5. You know, this is someone the staff liked quite a bit of, as far as I can tell. That's pretty much it for the, you know, Minnesota Timberwolves roster deep dive. Now, I do want to take a brief moment to talk about Coach Chris Finch. And, you know, Coach Finch, unfortunately going down with that knee injury early in the playoffs last season. I think that actually impacted the Wolves a lot more than we think. Him having a coach from the sideline was very impactful for this team, in my opinion. This is a great top-tier coach in this league. Again, anytime you see a newer coach come in and just totally change this, you know, the identity of this team, you saw it last year with Jamal Mosley of the Magic. You see it with Coach Dagnall in OKC. You know, there's a lot of times Coach Udoka in Houston, right? A lot of these Western Conference teams. Coach Finch has done a very similar thing with the Minnesota Timberwolves, and I have to just give a ton of support and round of applause for him. I think he's done an excellent job transforming the identity and actually finding an identity for this team, and having them lean into that so heavy throughout the season was so amazing for them. And again, that's another thing you could just build on for next season. You know, you are the team that is going to be an absolutely stingy defense next season. And I think that's your identity. You got to lean into it again. You got capable defenders on all levels of the floor. First unit, second unit, doesn't matter. So I think, you know, a lot of props to Chris Finch and his staff for, you know, weathering that storm of the injury. Hopefully he can be healthy for next season. I wish him nothing but the best. I love him as a coach. I think he's done a terrific job with this team. But that's pretty much it for the video. You know, hopefully you guys did enjoy the deep dive. Again, Minnesota fans, let me know if I got anything wrong in this video. I really tried to do my research, do right by your team, because, you know, I actually was rooting for the Timberwolves quite heavily last playoff series. Okay, so, you know, throughout the playoffs, I was really in support of them. I loved what they're doing there in Minnesota. I love your, you know, young core. I love Anthony Edwards, one of my favorite young players. I think some of your players get a little bit too much disrespect and hate, including Karl-Anthony Towns, Rudy Gobert. I love your draft, A+, no question about it. Hopefully the Kyle Anderson situation isn't too impactful. I think you brought some valuable depth pieces to replace him, but just getting that, you know, secondary playmaker ball handler in, you know, Rob Dillingham, a guy in the future that gets you a bucket in crunch time from the perimeter. You know, the team's double AE. Hey, guess what? We got another shifty, creative ball handler to get a bucket from the perimeter. That's Rob Dillingham. I love the draft pick there. Terrance Shannon Jr., another athlete that can kind of be a different player than you have, which is a, you know, bowling ball in transition that has a ton of juice and burst with the ball in his hands to be able to get by defenders and finish at a high percentage. I love this draft. I love this team. Minnesota fans. Let me know down in the comment section how we're feeling about it, and hopefully you guys have the best season possible next year. I'm wishing you guys luck and health and all of the above. So hopefully guys, let me know down in the comment section if I got anything wrong. Please correct me. That is not my intention, but I am going to get some things wrong. I don't watch every Minnesota Timberwolves game. I tried to watch as many as I can last year with the league pass, but at the end of the day, I'm a Sixers fan. So, I'm just going to miss certain things about your team. Please let me know what they are down in the comments. I will not be offended. I promise. As long as it's constructive, I do definitely welcome any feedback. So positive or negative, I prefer positive, but if it is something negative, as long as it's constructive, hey, I will listen to you. I'm going to be wrong a lot, throughout this channel. So, the more people that can correct me, the better. Please, if you guys could, just be so kind, drop a like on the video. If you made it this far, thank you guys for watching all the way to the end. Follow my Twitter, follow my Twitch. We're going to start streaming on Twitch again very soon in the future. Check out my other deep dives. We've done one for almost every team now. We're going to be continuing this series every day until we finish the entire league. This will be our 23rd deep dive, I believe. So, just a few more, probably a week away from finishing the series. And then after that, it's business as usual on this channel where we go through, NBA updates, NBA news, talking about different topics throughout the season that I find interesting, right? And it's going to be everyday content, all things NBA every day on this channel. Please subscribe if you guys haven't already. I really want to add a positive influence on this NBA community. There's a lot of toxicity and negativity and kind of, disingenuous stuff out there. People can do what they want to do. They're free to upload whatever they want to post on their YouTube channels. But for me, I want to provide a positive place in the NBA community that people can come to every day and just, hear unbiased takes. Maybe you laugh at a few things. Maybe you find some takes pretty interesting, or maybe you just, don't like me and that's why you watch. Whatever it is, I want you guys to stay around for this journey because I'm working really hard on this channel and I want you guys to be a part of something special, which is what I know I can make this channel into, but I need your help. So make sure you guys subscribe and stay tuned with the channel. Other than that, look forward to the next deep dive. I will see you tomorrow with that. And I'll catch you guys in the next video. This is your boy D Haven. As always, peace.